all. This is the All Bets Are Off Fall newsletter. Here we go. This time-sensitive missive is to help us prepare for a discombobulating, uniquely rare, and quite intense planetary event on September 6th, 7th that will help set the tone and themes for some time to come. Whenever Trickster of Awakening Uranus stations retrograde, every year for 5 months, it gives us more than the usual number of unpredictable and at times shocking nature-made and or man-made occurrences that shake us up to wake us up like nothing lesser ever could. Added to this, because of a synchronized total full moon eclipse in boundaryless Pisces that will be blood red in color, larger than usual, and visible across the globe to over 7 billion of us, we've all the necessary energetic ingredients for multiple events that may turbocharge a reboot of our mental operating systems all the way back to the original quote-unquote factory settings. More on this later. And for more on this reboot and rebirth, please refresh your screen with the newsletter entitled Kali Yuga 2.0, Staying the Course Through an Epic Plutonian Death Rattle for the Ages. On July 7th, 2025, higher mind ruling Uranus moved into Gemini, which rules the lower mind for most of the next 7 years. Therefore, it behooves us to do a deeper dive into what Uranus and Gemini will bring us, especially with this first retrograde coinciding synergistically with the full moon eclipse. This may amp up normal worldwide lunacy and make it seem exponentially more disturbing, especially with Pisces in the mix. One of the best ways to have a preview of where and how turbulence will be hitting us around the next curve is to look to the movement of the outer planets, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, to see how they'll be affecting us personally as well as globally. In my view, the most helpful astrological technique to predict how these transits will change us in our world is by looking at the past history of the exact same transits. This method is called a recurrence, and I use it all the time with clients to help predict what is most likely to occur in the probabilities based on their personal history when a major transit recurs. Uranus in Gemini takes place roughly every 84 years, and it always brings significant changes and upheavals, especially in global dynamics and all levels of communication, as well as personally wherever we have Gemini in our birth charts. What kind of mass tumultuous events may we be in store for based on historical recurrence? Well, for example, the last 3 times in history Uranus entered Gemini, which is every 84 years, the USA has gone to war. First, there was the American Revolutionary War, 1775 to 1781, which started with Uranus in Gemini when Mad King George imposed tariffs on tea. Coffee, anyone? This autocratic overreach became the last straw, the tipping point, to arouse the masses to outright rebellion. You can't make this stuff up. This was a bloody period with many lives lost, but in the bigger picture, all for a higher cause of the greater good for mankind, as America became a beacon of hope to other nations struggling to be born with liberty and justice for all. But now, the USA is experiencing the first Pluto return of the USA's chart in Aquarius since last year. This means that the United States has just commenced a new revolutionary 248-year cycle of death and rebirth, which Pluto rules. This recurrence is a test to see whether the USA can move to the next level of what began in 1776, of being a nation built on freedom and equality for all. Time will tell. The next recurrence was the U.S. Civil War, 1861 to 1865, began the day before Unity Consciousness ruling Neptune entered Aries, which just recurred last month. And this is a 165-year cycle. And warlike Mars was conjunct Uranus at 9 degrees Gemini. Lincoln had just been elected, and once war was declared, martial law was instituted. This was an exceptionally bloody period with more lives lost than in World War I and II combined, over 600,000 lives lost. But in the bigger picture, all for a higher cause of the greater good of mankind. by rectifying past crimes against humanity and freeing over 4 million souls from slavery, aka genocide by accretion. This recurrence is a test to see whether the USA can move to the next level of what began in the Civil War, of holding to the Bill of Rights, the Constitution, and all the amendments that are currently being threatened by an autocratic, racist, and fascist regime. Time will tell. And finally, the last time Uranus was in Gemini was 1941 to 1949, and the world was already deeply embroiled in World War II. Most significantly, Uranus moved into Gemini on Pearl Harbor Day, December 7, 1942, which, of course, was the shocking final tipping point to thrust America into the war. This led to the internment of 120,000 Japanese, with over two-thirds of them being citizens as a quote-unquote enemy race. This was a very bloody period with many lives lost, but in the bigger picture, all for the higher cause of the greater good for mankind by defeating a global axis of evil and putting an end to the genocide of over 6 million Jews and other minorities. Obviously, we're having an almost literal recurrence with another global axis of evil, i.e. Trump, Putin, and Netanyahu, and another genocide, this time of the Palestinian people. The last time, the survivors of the Holocaust formed the State of Israel, and this time, if the recurrence theme holds, the survivors of the present genocide will form their own state. It takes what it takes, unfortunately. Nonetheless, I invite you to hold to the unwavering faith and vision that the forces of light will prevail in the end, as I do. As we witness the current state of the world, while keeping in mind the above recurrences of Uranus and Gemini, Pluto and Aquarius, as well as Neptune and Saturn at 0 degrees Aries, there are a few things to keep in mind. Firstly, Uranus is above all totally unpredictable in its nature as a trickster. This means that while the way this transit plays out will have perhaps some echoes of past recurrences historically, it's crucial to remember that another war in the USA is not an inevitable outcome. In fact, events may present an entirely new but still shocking paradigm. Many times in reading transits, I'm hesitant to articulate exactly what will occur with a Uranus transit, except that something unexpected will happen, as then it won't happen, and something else will happen instead. Therefore, I've been known to exclaim, after the fact, quote-unquote, tricky, unpredictable Uranus strikes again. This included in my own chart when transiting Uranus retrograde backed over my ascendant, and I was on the receiving end of an incident, severe sunstroke, in which I almost dropped my body, but was revived at the last moment by being thrown into the icy Pacific Ocean to revive. Uranus uses shocks to the system, whether our nervous systems and or societal ones, to wake us up from our sleepwalking through life. And with Mercury ruling Gemini in the mix, which rules all levels of miscommunication and travel snafus, especially when Mercury is retrograde, we can expect more disruptions in how we communicate, process information, and get from point A to point B smoothly. Previously, World War II saw the rise of mass communication technologies like radio, the use of propaganda as a tool of war, and the development of early computers. But now, with Uranus ruling the internet and electricity, and Gemini ruling all levels of communication, I foresee the trickster having his way with disruptions, large and small, through breakdowns of the internet. Some perhaps starting locally, but also spreading and affecting globally various societal structures from business, banking, hospitals, travel, ad infinitum. Starting with this eclipse, but also as an ongoing theme throughout the next 7 years and beyond, these disruptions will be happening so much more than ever before that it will become a very exasperating and at times dangerous facet of our new normal, as we put all of our eggs, so to speak, in one basket of having just about everything running through cyberspace, which the trickster rules, with no backup systems in place! Exclamation point. Added to this, climate change is accelerating faster than originally predicted. As the planet heating up becomes our new normal, we're in for a very uncomfortable wake-up call, especially as Uranus rules electricity, as unprecedented long heat waves combined with the AC being out in countries that even have it becomes one of the newest causes of mass death. and causing a lot more climate migration. So we have the perennial choice of either surrendering to what is with equanimity in the flow as the high road, at least in the short run, or surrendering to despair. I call this choice a trickster's version of, quote unquote, have I got a deal for you? Along this theme, here's one more extremely pertinent historical recurrence. Uranus was in Gemini when the Gutenberg printing press was invented around 1444, opening up access to knowledge on a previously unimagined scale. Within 50 years, over 40,000 books were printed in Europe alone. Uranus again entered Gemini in 1523, giving thousands of people direct access to Scripture, which allowed humanity the right to find a direct individual relationship with God with no middlemen, thus confirming that the accessibility of language and the opening of the mind is another hallmark of Uranus and Gemini, which rules the mass consciousness as well. So now, the potential impacts of this round of Uranus and Gemini from 2025 to 2033 and beyond begin with the assimilation of artificial intelligence, AI, into daily life, and daily life and usage is a tool for making life easier and opening the mind more, just as access to books to the masses was a huge collective life changer with the printing press. Imagine that up until books were available to the masses, only the elite, the wealthy, and those in religious institutions had access to so much knowledge. The current view of AI may be mostly positive, but the warning label, of course, is that just as books do not automatically convey the truth, but can contain half-truths, downright lies, false information, and twisted and or alternative facts, so too is the internet a hotbed of disinformation. This means that the mass consciousness can get duped into believing falsehoods manipulated into the program of AI by those in control of inputting all the data for their own purposes. I've always considered myself a neo-Luddite, aka resistant to the undesirable elements in technological change while seeking to retain the desirable elements, and thus was slow to utilize, much less enjoy, the internet and computers in general, being about 10 years behind the mass use of these tools. In 2000, I finally succumbed and got over my literal panic attacks whenever anything to do with computers was even mentioned at all. This was when a friend convinced me that surfing the web was like a giant yellow pages with pictures for shopping, making looking for anything needed much easier and with more variety, including internet dating. I started with astrology software, so much easier than using a service to fax me charts. After that, I started reaching out to clients much more frequently with newsletters instead of stuffing thousands of envelopes like in the olden days of the 90s. And finally, I was completely sold when I discovered in 2008, after much resistance, how much time I save having a website to explain my work, services, fees, and philosophy. My very simplistic understanding of AI is that it is composed of programs which synthesize at ultra-high speed all the data continuously updating on the World Wide Web into summations of all information that is available. But just like with books, discriminating mind must always be present and operating, as AI will not weed out all the lies, falsehoods, and half-truths, which are not filtered out of the mix in the answers provided, or even willfully inputted to mislead. So while AI can be a useful tool personally and collectively in business, medicine, the law, and all other fields of human endeavor, ultimately, we must be vigilant in remembering that it is also loaded with misinformation in the mix, as only trickster Uranus and devious Gemini could supply. In summation, AI responses have great potential for disseminating disinformation and may include mistakes even beyond the capacities of human error alone. The dualistic nature of Gemini combined with Uranus's disruptive energy could also lead to increased challenges related to propaganda campaigns and cyber warfare. In fact, the worst-case scenario of the darkest side of AI is mind control of the masses, with no backup plan available to confirm the truth independently beyond what AI provides. Thus, the masses can be manipulated as the lowest common denominator of intelligence, with 98% of the populace asleep and ignorant. Consequently, if we look at the already surreal example of the selling of the lie of Trump and the creation of MAGA via Fox News and fraudulent online accounts, and then add on AI to this mix, this would equate to even more mind control of a population of zombie-like robots in a grotesque twilight zone. We're already seeing a live event unfolding in real time over 10 years now of a dystopian reality beyond what most sci-fi novels have even been able to come up with. Stupid is as stupid does. So while AI may help humanity in many expeditious ways, this benefit may be outweighed in the bigger picture by its extreme potential for egregious misuse. Kind of like many pharmaceutical drugs, very useful, but with potentially harmful side effects. To be a lover of duality. One final caveat. Uranus will actually retrograde back into Taurus on November 7th, 2025, before re-entering Gemini in April 2026, where it will remain until May 2033. This gives us a just over 6-month review of all the lessons learned and wisdom gained, with Uranus wrapping up his journey in comfort-loving Taurus. When Uranus first moved into earthy Taurus in March 2019, I wrote that we need to prepare ourselves to be able to witness with equanimity, this is just before the pandemic hit, with equanimity more and more of that which has been known and safe falling away. And now, through April 26, 2026, this theme will be amplify the trickster of awakening's energies more than ever before. So we can expect even more, oh yes, unpredictable events, whether man-made and or nature-made, occurring during this last phase of this particular cycle of karmic lessons coming our way on all levels. To see how well you've learned the Uranian curriculum of the last 7 years in Taurus, and there's a link to all your stagnant comfort zones are gone. After this review, we'll then have an unprecedented 6.5-year sojourn through duality-loving Gemini, kicking off on April 26, 2026. This will bring forth a period of immense technological advances that just might change everything over the long term in an unprecedented acceleration buoyed by the quickening. And there's a link to my last newsletter on the quickening. The individual impacts of the effects of this Uranus transit will be felt differently by each individual based on their unique astrological birth chart, but most especially if there are planets or angles in Gemini natally. Nonetheless, my general read on this, as it pertains to each of our conscious evolutions, is based on the fact that Uranus rules the higher mind and intuition. Therefore, many gifted souls will be receiving psychic downloads from the universe at the same genius level of an Einstein, and that the implementation of these Uranian insights will change how we survive and thrive on planet Earth going forward through the vehicle of the Gemini ruling mass consciousness implementing these insights into practical solutions for climate change and more. Let us hope. So there will be much more of this, and this is a quote by Steve Jobs. Here's to the crazy ones, the misfits, the rebels, the troublemakers, the round pegs in the square holes, the ones who see things differently. They're not fond of rules, and they have no respect for the status quo. You can quote them, disagree with them, glorify or vilify them. But the only thing you can't do is ignore them, because they change things. They push the human race forward. And while some may see them as the crazy ones, we see genius. Because the people who are crazy enough to think they can change the world are the ones who do. Yay! Uranus expresses best through the lens of Gemini's positive attributes, which include quick-wittedness, skillful communications, flexible and adaptable thinking, lightheartedness, and a playful, mischievous personality predisposition. And Geminis can also be very persuasive. But then there is the dark side of Gemini, also known as the shadow side, which everyone, every planet, and every sign has. That's when persuasiveness gets twisted into deceit through manipulation in word and deed. Also, the ego mind becomes superficial, scattered, overly changeable, and easily bored and distracted. At this point, it's timely to mention that the dangerously deranged idiot Trumpstein epitomizes an almost perfect replica of a Uranus and Gemini dark side archetype, with his Sun, Uranus, and North Node of Destiny conjuncting his midheaven in Gemini. This means that he is being true to his dark side nature by playing out the roles of con man, grifter, snake oil salesman, circus barker, etc. But let's look at the bright side. While it will take years to repair all the wreckage after he's gone from the stage, which hopefully will be soonish, after that we'll slowly get to watch as the pendulum swings the other way, which it always does, and will get quite extremely in this case. Then perhaps we'll get universal health care and all the other goodies that democratic socialism will provide. It takes what it takes in this plane of duality, opposites, and polarities. Just as Neptune is considered the higher octave of Venus, meaning cosmic, transpersonal, universal love versus personal love, so too is Uranus the higher octave of Mercury, meaning higher mind, Buddha mind, the witness, the soul, versus lower mind, left brain, analytical mind, monkey mind. In fact, Mercury ruling Gemini personifies what is known as the monkey mind. This concept is rooted in Buddhist teachings about the nature of mind and the path to liberation from suffering. In Buddhist philosophy, monkey mind refers to the restless, unsettled, and often chaotic nature of the human mind. It describes a state where thoughts jump around erratically, like monkeys swinging from branch to branch, making it difficult to focus or find inner peace. Traits of the monkey mind, which we all have as part of our humanness and as a subset of the lower mind, which includes the left brain, ego, identified analytical mind, are restlessness and distraction. The core idea is that the mind doesn't stay still, constantly shifting focus from one thought or feeling to another. Emotional turmoil. This mental state can be accompanied by anxiety, worry, and a sense of being overwhelmed by internal chatter. And difficulty concentrating. The constant mental activity makes it challenging to focus on tasks, engage in mindful activities like meditation, or simply be present in the moment. However, it's important to note that the monkey mind is not something to be ashamed of, especially for those of us challenged with dyslexia or ADHD, but rather a natural human experience. Meditation and mindfulness practices are often recommended as ways to observe and gently calm the monkey mind. And in Dzogchen, the highest vehicle of Buddhist teachings, the primary directive to realizing our innate awakened state is, quote unquote, don't distract yourself. If you're ready to start taming your monkey mind, The Miracle of Mindfulness, a book by Thich Nhat Hanh, is absolutely the best place to start. Available on Amazon. For each of us personally, this Uranus and Gemini 7-year cycle will bring the opportunity to choose to liberate ourselves by switching our allegiance for identity to the higher mind and away from an over-identification with the monkey mind. Or by default, we'll find ourselves even more at the mercy of the extreme bondage that is the hallmark of this lower mental function. Social media and doom scrolling feed the speeding up of the monkey mind, as need then becomes addiction for this level of stimulation. Then calmer mental waters like peace and equanimity feel like a drug withdrawal from all this monkeyish, sick excitement. Similarly to the way online pornography addiction ruins the capacity to enjoy fully embodied erotic play and deep human connections. It's also why Oliver Sacks, the great neurologist, called social media, quote unquote, a neurological disaster. Free-floating anxiety, which I call metaphysical angst, is a hallmark of the monkey mind, and while it may continuously arise, we can choose not to buy into it on a daily basis. I call this arising an infinite mental shell game, where it's human nature for anxiety to always be under one of the shells. This choosing not to distract ourselves by playing the anxiety shell game is the path to liberation, as is letting go of the bondage of clinging to illusions of physical safety and security, but rather to keep in mind Ram Dass's saying, quote unquote, death is absolutely safe. Don't forget that the monkey mind is ruled and fueled by fear, which arises at the root chakra levels of survival from our animal nature. And there's a link to my article on the nature of addiction. It's only human. In closing, every one of us is here on a soul assignment that we consciously committed to before entry, and then, just as soon as part of our souls emerged from the womb in our little baby bodies, we forgot. I call this the quote-unquote master race, which commences the divine play of cosmic hide-and-seek called Leela, linked to Leela, in the most ancient Vedic teachings. Added to this, just before our physical births, we had our quote-unquote, oh shit, what have I done moment. And right after that, our souls whispered in our ears, quote unquote, stay buckled up, it's going to be a very bumpy ride. And then, here we are. Once we consciously recommit to being fully embodied in this incarnation and release any victim identity to our lot in life, our next lesson in the Earth School curriculum is to accept the truth that it's imperative that we prioritize healing our allotted personal karma before we invest all our energies in changing, much less saving the world. For then, in an ongoing, sustained way, we can truly move to work with healing through the ripple effect, the karma of the world as expressed through the current fate of humanity and the Earth, through our influence, energies, and level of consciousness. To think otherwise is an ego-fueled delusion, as our vibrational frequency is not fully raised enough in a balanced way to have an optimal effect, until our personal karma is mostly healed. Reawakening to the deepest levels of our purposes here, our assignment or mission, if you will, includes firstly accepting, without equivocation, bargaining, or wishing things were different, the full package of how our lives will unfold in the probabilities. All influences by the circumstances of our birth and upbringing, the personality predispositions articulated in our astrological birth charts, and the allotted karma we took incarnation to heal. In other words, this is a quote by Lao Tzu's later writings, if you want to awaken all of humanity, then awaken all of yourself. If you want to eliminate the suffering in the world, then eliminate all that is dark and negative in yourself. Truly, the greatest gift you have to give is that of your own self-transformation. Unquote. One of the primary purposes of the reincarnational cycles of the earth plane, as we learn to be co-creators with linear space and time as our training wheels, is to expand our range through choosing lifetimes with the most challenging roles and circumstances. This includes being able to hold much more than one emotion at a time, from sorrow to joy, as well as being able to witness all the wonders and horrors of the earth game in all its absurdity and pathos with some measure of equanimity. This also includes being able to laugh with cosmic humor at the absurdity of our present predicament. Like witnessing a video of January 6, 2020, that was the DC riot, Trump-induced, as a historical recurrence of the barbarians invading Rome. Also, seeing the absurdity and recently witnessing the hero, who was a lawyer at the DOJ, who used his Subway hero sandwich as a weapon by throwing it at the National Guard troops and then was arrested for it in D.C., but then released. And the absurdity, of course, in witnessing the ongoing quote-unquote emperor has no clothes farce. Here's a way to train our higher mind, Uranian perspective as our default consciousness for identity. Please listen to the following teaching while simultaneously viewing the state of the world and the mass consciousness as the ultimate sickness we're dealing with now as a race. So this is a teaching from Dzogchen master, the 18th century, and it's called Sickness. Seeing the sickness as the teachers, pray to them. Sicknesses are coming to you by the kindness of the masters and the three jewels. Sicknesses are your accomplishments, so worship them as the deities. Sicknesses are the signs that your bad karmas are being exhausted. Do not look at the face of your sickness, but at the one, the mind, who is sick. Do not place the sicknesses on your mind, but place your naked intrinsic awareness upon your sicknesses. This is the instruction on sickness arising as the Dharmakaya. The body is inanimate and mind is emptiness. What can cause pain to an inanimate thing or harm the emptiness? Search for where the sicknesses are coming from, where they go, and where they dwell. Sicknesses are mere sudden projections of your thoughts. When those thoughts disappear, the sicknesses dissolve too. There is no better fuel than sicknesses to burn off the bad karmas. Don't get into entertaining a sad mind or negative views over the sicknesses, but see them as signs of the waning of your bad karmas and rejoice over them. And like I said, look at the state of the world as our mass sicknesses. Daily opportunities will continuously arise to choose to identify with the Uranian higher mind of the intuition, inner voice, witness, Buddha mind, soul level, and less with the Gemini ruling monkey mind. As far as the left brain analytical mind is concerned, it's optimal to switch it on as needed as a necessary tool for the ego little self personality to function in 3D. The rest of the time we can enjoy being in the flow of the Iranian higher self. And yes, there is a switch we just forgot. So now we need to remember to not just turn our devices off to give our monkey mind a rest, but also to switch off the left brain altogether. Then our lives become a dance of balancing the higher and lower selves, the soul witness, and the ego personality, while holding the vision that many truths are simultaneously true in this relative plane, as well as cultivating the capacity to experience the fullest range of human emotions simultaneously, especially including cosmic humor. And finally, it's not spiritual bypassing to hold to the long-range Taoist view that everything is evolving perfectly in the flow of the divine plan. In fact, the original quote-unquote factory settings that I mentioned in the beginning, the factory settings of our mental operating system is that quote-unquote all is well. Anything else is a distraction from this higher truth. What has happened in the past is happening now, and what will be in the future are all one in the eternal now. So here we go. That's it. And then it ends with a quote by Einstein, as it began with a quote by Einstein, and I'll put those both in the text. Okay. Hope you enjoyed.